Job. That's one.
Okay, we are now recording. I think I know everyone here on the call. I'm Nate, and my camera just went fuzzy. What's going on here? I'm going to switch to a different camera because my iPhone camera looks really great until it goes fuzzy, and then it doesn't look so great. Let me switch to this one here. All right, you guys can still see me. All right. So I want to introduce you guys to Chris. I think some of you know Chris. Chris and I met at the Sundai Club, which is also where I met Jordan and Gabe. And just a really brief plug for Sundai. Sundai is a weekly hack group where people get together and hack on AI projects. And it's been really fun. Just got back from a retreat on the Cape, frolicking with a bunch of other hackers. Didn't open the laptop once, so that was good. Jordan was there. He knows. So yeah, Chris is going to help me moderate. If you guys have questions, just feel free to chime in. But we did put together like a Slido thing. If you want to put your questions in there, you can upvote existing questions. Okay, you already put the link in the chat. Thank you. So yeah, we'll get started. I'm going to show, I've got a few slides, and I'm going to show both Roo Code and Claude Code. I'm less familiar with Claude Code. I've only been using it for about a week, so I'm still kind of getting up to speed with the Claude Code Flow. But this is a learning process. We're all learning together. It's all good. Okay. My presentation here. So if you want to get, yeah, this is just a QR code to add your questions if you want to do that. I'll just start out by saying that AI is not magic. I think you guys all know this as engineers. But just because you can tell the AI to do things doesn't mean it's going to do it right the first time. And it does require guidance, and it requires human expertise. So just keep that in mind as I'm going through this stuff. Sometimes it does feel like magic, like when you see it one shot an app and you're like, how the hell did it do that? But that's usually predicated by giving it a good prompt and guiding it. So we've got a lot of stuff to cover. I don't know if we'll get through all this today, but we'll see how we do. I don't know, this thing keeps, this sidebar keeps popping up. How can I hide sidebar? Okay, so before I get into the content, sometimes these things can take a little while to get, to build stuff. So I want to kind of fire off a couple tests. So this is something that I started working on at the AI Tinkerers meetup. And it's, actually, this isn't the right one to, we'll skip this one for now. I'm gonna go over to the one that I was just working on, which is here, this Claude Flow. So this is an example of using Claude Flow to build an application from scratch. And actually, I do want to do this from scratch. I want to show you guys what this process looks like. So we're gonna open up a new folder, go into my documents, code, and we're just going to call this jam. Okay. And now to initialize the Claude Flow, you just type npx Claude Flow at latest, and then you say SPARC. Oh, sorry, you say init SPARC. I think that's it. I don't know why the terminal is not actually coming up here. Oh, there we go. Okay, so what this is going to do is it's going to bootstrap my directory with a few things. It's going to put a RooModes file in there. It's going to put a claude.md file, and it's going to just basically set up my environment so I can start using Claude Flow. So here's some nice commands telling me what it did. And if we open up this Claude Flow file here, this is basically giving us project structure, how to build your application. Now, this is assuming we're building a Node.js application, but you can use this to build Python or Django or Rails or whatever. And then it's telling you these are the different ways you can get started with your project. So the one that I've been using is this one here, but you can also spawn coders, researchers, testers. You can also manage these different tasks. There's a lot of commands to remember. That's one thing that I'm still learning with the Claude Flow is like when you use what. But right before the call, I used this one and it worked pretty well for me. So we're going to do this because I know it works. So does anyone have something they would like to build? We could just run a test right now.
Something that makes lots of money. Is that too vague?
Can you be more specific? It makes lots of money.
I'm just joking.
All right. So I do happen to have a list of sample apps so that we don't have to come up with something on the spot. So this
we had one from Gabe to find people that have the same dream as you.
Yeah, before. Yeah, you can talk to them.
Find people who had the same dream as you?
Yeah. So you're like, oh, I was at Lake Okoboji water skiing. Oh, I had that same dream last night too.
Okay.
Actually, it's kind of complicated. It probably involves, I don't know how you match the script. Never mind. Yeah, it's too complicated. Sorry.
We can maybe try that one later. I'm going to go with one of these because it has, the nice thing about these ones is that it has sort of like problem solution, key features, monetization. This is the one that I one-shotted earlier today, this meeting summarizer. I'll show you guys what it looks like. I kind of like this personalized learning path. Habit tracker. I bet you'd like that one, Chris. Should we try this one?
No.
Okay, I'm going to try the habit tracker. I'm reading The Power of Habit right now, so this is kind of relevant. Okay, I'm going to hop back here, and then I'm going to paste in that whole thing. Hopefully it's not like a line break. Okay, so now what you're going to see it do is it's going to break this down into like a to-do list. I like these comments. It says simmering, schlepping, pondering. So begin with a comprehensive task analysis to-do breakdown. So it's going to analyze the project requirements and create a comprehensive task breakdown. So here are the to-dos, right? It's going to do a project setup initial structure. It's going to design the database schema. It's going to set up an authentication system, create a habit management functionality, implement habit tracking, streak logic, build gamification system, design, implement mobile first UI, create social groups, implement progress visualization with charts, add real-time updates for group activities, create landing page, onboarding flow, testing optimization. Okay, so it's off to the races. It's going to just kind of work autonomously.
What I like about this design is the to-dos are actually files. So this is the simplest and most effective agent-to-agent communication I've seen, and agent-to-human at the same time.
Yeah, it just creates a to-do file that it updates as it goes. So I can show you guys the one that I did earlier today. I think it's this one. No, that's the one we were looking at before, Claude Flow. Here it is. So this is the meeting summarizer app that it built. And it came up with an architecture, which you can see here. That's the system architecture, the data flow, the database schema, API endpoints, security concerns, freemium model. And then it created these initial SQL, basically migrations that I had to run using the Supabase MCP admin. It created a README file. It's how to, basically what this app does. So just to put this in context, this is the first item on this list. This is the AI-powered meeting summarizer. So I basically did the same thing you guys just saw me do. I just pasted in this text here and told it this is what I want it to build. And it selected a tech stack, gave me some instructions on how to set it up. And surprisingly, after I added a m.local file with the Supabase credentials, which, by the way, I was able to set up via an MCP, basically just told it to use the Supabase MCP to execute this SQL file, and it just automatically connected with the cloud-based Supabase server, took the local file on my machine and executed it on the server. And then I just pointed my m.local file at the Supabase stuff. And then when I started up the app, let's see, go back to, where's the URL here? This one, localhost 3000. This is what it looked like. It already had created a landing page. It created an authentication system, so you can say I'm logged in right now. And then I tried adding a new meeting, just uploaded an MP3 file, and it transcribed it, created a couple action items. And this was like a one shot. I did not have to edit fix anything. Oh, actually, I take that back. There was one issue where I had like an old version of Next.js, and it had to update that. But that was pretty much it to get this working. It probably took, I want to say, 20, 30 minutes to build this end to end, with me not really touching anything other than creating the database and updating the Next.js version.
You touched on a couple things that popped up in the question, so I just wanted to maybe now's a good time to
Yeah, sure.
bring them in. One was from TJ. You mentioned the Supabase MCP and having it kind of build or manage your backend for you. So, you make any suggestions on useful MCP servers that you use frequently?
Yeah, I'm gonna cover that in the presentation. That's a
Great.
good question.
Great.
So let's see how our flow jam is doing here. All right, so what has it done? It's still working on the project initial structure. Okay, it looks like it's installing 383 packages. Now it's installing Supabase. So it's already created this habit tracker directory.
While it's still stepping, speaking of results from prompts, there was a question from Aaron: is what's the most unexpected result you've gotten from a prompt? And was it better than what you were originally even hoping for? Did you have to start over?
Yeah, well, the example I just gave, like I didn't expect this meeting summarizer to work the first time. Like just giving it that prompt, and it built it basically without any errors first time in like record time, like within 20 minutes, 30 minutes, it was done. But the most complicated one would probably be the WhatsApp thing that you and I are working on. I've never built a WhatsApp app before, and so there was a lot of new stuff to learn, and it basically recommended like microservices, so it has all these different TypeScript, and it also built it in TypeScript, which I haven't used before, and was able to get a basic WhatsApp working. It took maybe a day or two, I think one day, to like kind of get the basic infrastructure working, and then actually the most time-consuming thing in getting the WhatsApp thing working was navigating Facebook, Meta, and WhatsApp manager screens to get a phone number, and just to get everything set up was a pain in the butt. I think that actually took more time than building the app. Okay, so it's writing a schema.sql file now. This one, it's writing a m.local file. And yeah, so before this app is going to work, we're going to have to go create a Supabase database, but we can maybe use the MCP server to do that. So we don't have to click around on a website. Okay, so while that's running, let me just hop back to the slides, because I did prepare a little presentation for you guys. So yeah, why use AI assisted coding tools? Can you guys see this, by the way, or should I enlarge the screen? Thought I would keep this thing running so we can kind of monitor it in the background. AI is transforming the way software is built today. If things continue at the pace they are today, it's just going to be even more so in the future. And so using AI assisted coding tools, you guys wouldn't be here if you weren't at least interested in that. Getting a head start now rather than being left behind. I think developers who embrace AI assisted coding tools are going to thrive, and people who kind of bury their head in the sand and say like, I'm not going to touch them, I think they're going to have a rude awakening. The biggest thing for me is just my productivity is like 10x what it was before. I can do more, can build more in less time. Also, there's a lot of parts of coding that I don't particularly like, you know, fixing bugs and writing tests, writing documentation, and the AI does a lot of that kind of drudgery work for you. So I can focus on like defining the features and the UI, and so the AI kind of takes a lot of the stuff that you know you should do, but you oftentimes don't really get around to it. And then, you know, from a kind of entrepreneurial startup product idea perspective, you can build software now without the capital requirements. Like you used to have to raise money and hire people. Now you can kind of, as a one-person company, you can kind of get pretty far. And so you can delay that funding and hiring step. And then also lowers the friction to experiment. You can try a lot more things just because it doesn't take that much effort or time to try lots of ideas. So like before, the opportunity cost was just too high. If I spend a weekend working on this, that means I can't work on this other idea. Whereas now you could have like 10 ideas running in parallel. This is what Reuven Cohen, who I'm going to introduce you guys, has been doing. Is he's got this on steroids. He's just running like tons of different projects simultaneously. So who's this Reuven Cohen guy? When I saw these posts on LinkedIn, I've been following him for maybe 10 years. And lately he's been really spearheading a lot of AI assisted coding stuff. And so this was one of his posts where he said that he let SPARC and RooCode run for 12 hours nonstop. And the project had 100% test coverage, and it cost him $68. And he finished this complex client engagement, and the client estimated it would have taken their team several months to build that themselves. And he did it basically overnight for $68. You can see down here this tool does an estimate based on kind of hourly rate times lines of code, and then it makes, I don't know exactly how it makes its estimates, but there's a whole methodology of how these computations are made. He also worked on this complex 5G fiber optics traffic optimization system. He did that in like 8 hours, and the client was quoted to build this would cost $800,000 by, I think, another vendor, and he did it for $89. That's what his token costs were. So when I read things like this about what he's doing, I said, I've got to figure out how he's doing this. How is he able to keep the cost so low and deliver such high quality software? So there's a lot of options out there. It's pretty overwhelming. There's like all the no code, low code tools like Lovable and Bolt and Replit. It seems like every week there's a new one coming out. You're probably familiar with Cursor and Windsurf, but there's also like Zed and Trey. Trey is from ByteDance. And there's even more IDs out there. Then there's the VS Code extension. So there's GitHub Copilot. That was one of the first ones that came out a few years ago. Klein and the Roo Code, which is essentially a fork of Klein. So the community kind of splintered, and Roo Code went off and built their own version of Klein and called it Roo Code. And this is a more recent entrant on the scene called Kilo Code, and they claim to be a combination of Klein and Roo Code. They're taking like the best features of Klein and the best features of Roo Code, and then adding some of their own sugar to it. And then Augment is another one that people like because it can run multiple tasks in parallel, like background tasks. And then there's the command line terminal tools. So Claude Code and OpenAI has Codex, and then there's an open source one called Aider Chat. So today we're going to be talking about these two, the ones in red, Roo Code and Claude Code. Obviously not going to have time to talk about all of them, but those are the two that I have the most experience with. Mostly Roo Code I've been using for the last couple months. Claude Code, not as much experience, but I'm really liking what I'm seeing so far. So this is kind of my evolution. I started out Windsurf like back in, it was January. I got a month free subscription. So I tried it out for a month, and then I discovered Cursor, and it had some nice features that Windsurf didn't have. So I used that for a little while. And then I discovered RooCode when I learned what Reuven Cohen was using, and I was like, this has got a lot of advantages over Cursor. For one of the downsides is that you pay per API call versus like a flat fee. But I've heard from people using Cursor that the flat fee is not always that great because you run up against limits. Whereas with RooCode, you don't really hit limits. You just run out of tokens, and you have to pay for more tokens. And so I've been using something called Requesty, which is basically like a wrapper around a lot of different models. So you basically pay Requesty, and then Requesty gives you an API key that you can then choose one of like several dozen models. So you could use OpenAI's models, you can use Anthropic models, you can use open source models, Google. Basically allows you to like just pay one vendor, and then they kind of handle all of your APIs, so you don't have to like put multiple API keys in. The other cool thing is that they can route requests to different models. So you can say, for this task, I want to use Gemini. For this other task, I want to use OpenAI or Anthropic. Changing the game because they're more expensive than Windsurf and Cursor. But if you have high usage, it's way more economical than using RooCode, because RooCode you pay, like I could easily hit $100, $200 just in a few days with RooCode in API token costs. Whereas with Claude Code, it's like kind of a flat rate. And if you're doing a lot of AI assisted coding, Claude Code is a really good deal. I mean, it looks expensive because you're used to spending $20 on Cursor or Windsurf, and then you're like, oh my gosh, it's like 10 times as much. But it does like 10 times more than what these other coding tools do. So what do I like about RooCode? It's open source, so it's evolving very quickly. There's a lot of community engagement. There's like a subreddit. There's an active Discord. They also do weekly office hours. If you have questions, you can hop in the office hours and say, I'm having this problem, or is this feature what do you think about this feature? And they're very receptive to new features. Like, it seems like every few days there's a new version coming out with new features, and they're just moving it at such a rapid pace that I feel very confident in RooCode as like a tool that I want to keep in my toolbox. The other thing I like about it is very customizable. You can tweak different modes, you can define usage rules, you can really shape the behavior, and it's model agnostic, so you can use any model with it, including open source LLMs locally. If you want to get a big fat machine, you can just run your own models. They also have these specialized modes. You can think of these as sort of like personas or agents that have their own behaviors and assigned to different models. So like I said before, you could have your debugger using Anthropic Claude Sonnet, and you could have like your researcher using Gemini thinking. So you can use different models. You can like optimize your costs based on what you're trying to do. It also has this thing called boomerang tasks, or orchestrator is another word for it. So this is essentially when you give it a task, and then it breaks down that task into smaller, more manageable pieces. And the nice thing about this is these can be delegated to special assistants. So you can have like, this mode is really good at doing debugging, and it costs less than this other mode, which is more for thinking. And you can also tell it what MCP servers it can use. Also, each subtask runs in its own context, rather than like if you've been using Windsurf or Claude Code, sometimes the context window just keeps growing and growing and growing. And so every time you make a request, it's having to pass like all the past history in that request, which means you eat up your token count pretty quickly. Whereas with boomerang tasks, it condenses the context, and it only passes the information it needs to complete that subtask. So that subsequent request is using fewer tokens than if it has to pass like all the context. It also has checkpoints. This is something I really liked about Cursor when I was using it. So you can always like revert back to an earlier state if something gets messed up. It does this context condensing, so it takes like a really big context window and it shrinks it, speeds things up. And this is a new feature they recently added where you can read multiple files. Instead of having to read one file per request, which also adds up all the API calls, it can just read multiple files and send it all in one API request, which cuts down on your costs. They recently added this feature, code base indexing. So a lot of times, like if you're using Cursor Windsurf, they forget about files they've already written, or they get confused, and you have to tell them to keep telling them the same thing. With code base indexing, it's basically creating a semantic search index of your project using AI embedding, so it can really understand and navigate large code bases and find relevant code based on meaning rather than just keywords. Okay, so let's turn over to Claude Code Flow. So this is you can kind of think of this as like taking the best of Claude Code and then just adding memory and orchestration and scheduling and enterprise security MCP integration. So it's just making Claude Code better. It's a way of thinking about it. And I should mention that this is something that has been evolving over probably like a year. Reuven has been working on something called SPARC, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But SPARC is basically, that's this one over here. It's basically like a methodology for building software. So like there's like specification, there's pseudocode, there's architecture, refinement, and then completion. And to carry out this SPARC methodology in something like RooCode or Claude Code, he's created like 17 specialized modes, and we're gonna see what those modes are. This is how the Claude Flow works. I generated this diagram just by dumping in the repo into getdiagram.com, and it analyzed the code base and told me this is basically how the Claude Flow software is architected. So you have this front end. This Claude Flow is basically a shell script that calls the orchestrator. Orchestrator decides, is there an MCP call that I need to do here, in which case it goes over here to the MCP server. If not, it goes to the event bus. That sends an event to the coordination manager, and that reads from the memory manager, which is either a SQLite database or Markdown files, to see is there anything I've done before that I should know about before I carry out this task. Just something that AI-assisted coding tools are typically not very good at. They have very short-term memory. So this is an attempt to try to alleviate that problem. And then it spawns a new session. It calls the terminal manager, and then that essentially calls the external LLM, the Claude Code. And then the memory manager is writing to either SQLite database or Markdown files. So like I said, this is the fourth iteration of SPARC. So I think Aaron asked a question a few days ago, like, this thing seems really new. Like, is it solid? Can I trust it? And the reason I'm very confident that this is high quality stuff is because Roo has been iterating on this problem domain pretty consistently for the last 6 months. He basically is just keeping improving, and I think he's getting pretty good at it. So in December, he launched this thing. This was like the very first version. Then he created this Create SPARC back in April. And then in June earlier this month, he created something called Claude SPARC, which is just like a shell script. And then he created Claude Code Flow, which is kind of based on the learnings. I think the Claude SPARC was kind of like just a test to see proof of concept. Could this be done? And then he sort of systematized, productized it with Claude Code Flow. So how does SPARC work? Well, you basically have this orchestrator. So this is that boomerang task thing. If we're talking about RooCode, an orchestrator that goes through these different phases, right? So, and then for each phase, it has different modes. So these blue boxes are different modes within RooCode. So there's a spec writer, there's a an ask mode. There's a architect and a Supabase admin in the first two phases. And then you have the refinement phase, so coders, testers, debuggers, security reviewers, optimizers. And then the completion phase, you have documentation writer, system integrator, deployment monitor, DevOps, and then MCP integration. And this is just a description of what all these modes do. And if you remember before, I was talking about how the Roo Code software can basically hand off tasks to specialized modes. You can think of these like agents or assistants. And each of these modes has like specific instructions. They have a custom prompt. They have tools that they can use. Sometimes they have MCP servers that they can access. And then you can assign a model, which LLM are you going to use with that mode. So this is kind of my workflow. I'm still refining this, but I found that it works really well to generate what's called a PRD, product requirements document. And you can get AI to help you with that. You can give AI like a high-level blueprint, or even a concept. You just give it a concept, it'll generate a blueprint, then it'll generate a PRD, and then using something like Perplexity or Gemini or basically any deep research tool, it will go out and do further research if you want it to. If you don't feel like you need it to do research, you can skip that step. And then I found that generating like high-level tests from user stories helps the AI to kind of stay on task and know what they need to work on next. And it also gives it sort of AI verifiable completion. So it knows when it's completed a feature because it can look at the test and see, well, did I satisfy all the user stories in this test? Designing the system architecture, and it can also search GitHub to find existing projects that it could build on top of, and then it builds the app to pass these high-level tests. And then finally, it just keeps continuing to build it and doing. You can also call out to Perplexity MCP if there's an error or an issue. It basically like do troubleshooting on its own, which is pretty cool.
We had a question from Andy of what is an example of a high-level test?
Yeah, that's a great question. We can pop over to an example right now, and I can show you guys what that looks like. So I think we have some in here. So these are all high-level tests that were generated. You can see they're just markdown files, and this is the master acceptance plan. So if we open this up, so this is showing outlines the strategy, scope, phases, criteria for high-level end-to-end acceptance testing. It has the scope, has the reference documents, the testing strategy. It has the different phases, so user onboarding and account management. So for each phase, there's a number of high-level tests, and you can see they have a number, a code, and then that corresponds to one of these markdown files over here. So this like HLT TC001 corresponds to this one here. So this is an example of a high-level test: new user onboarding, language auto detection, and POPIA consent. So these are the user stories, preconditions, and these are the test steps. So what's the user action via WhatsApp? What's the expected system response? And then what's the AI verifiable check? So this is what it uses to then generate like unit tests or end-to-end tests. It uses these high-level tests. And then the acceptance criteria. And by the way, this was all generated by AI. I didn't write any of these tests. I reviewed them. I looked at them to make sure that they properly captured the requirements, but it did all this for me. And the nice thing about having these high-level tests is you really have much higher level of reliability and verifiability, right? You can verify that the software has been built according to the user stories that you agreed upon, either with your team or with the client. You can point back to these markdown files and say, does this represent how you want this to work? Now, some of these are very technical, right? So this is like, you'd have your engineers looking at these, or you'd look at them if you were just building this by yourself. Does that answer your question, Andy? Andy, if you're saying something, we can't hear you.
He nodded his head in agreement.
He's in agreement.
Yes.
He appreciated it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. So the other thing that I've been experimenting with is if you've ever used like Lovable or Replit or Bolt, you can just type in, a short description, and it can walk you through a process to further refine your requirements. So, with the help of someone else in the Roo Code community, I put together this quick start wizard. And basically that's like you think of this as like an onboarding process. So rather than having to give the AI like really vague requirements and just hope that it gets it right, you can go through a step-by-step process to really get a product requirements document that captures the features, the user stories, who the audience is, kind of the overall overarching goal. And then the AI can keep referring back to that product requirements document as it's building out your project. And then it can also build, tests from that document as well. So this is going to be like a wall of text. I apologize, this is not very readable. But this is an example of like one of the modes, the quick start wizard mode. And you can see that it's giving instructions here. You're going to guide the user through choosing an onboarding path. You're going to produce a concept.md file, a blueprint.md file, and a project requirements doc based on the blueprint. And then you're going to give the user two different paths that they can take. They can do a fully synthesized, where the system generates a project idea and the details with minimal user input, a semi-synthesized, where the user provides the idea and some details and the system kind of helps flesh it out, or a fully customized one where the system is doing minimal additions. Like this is where maybe you already have a document kind of already ready to go, and you don't need to iterate and kind of riff with the AI. You're just giving it like, here's my PRD already written. And then this is what I've been using for this is Gemini, the Gemini MCP. So it's basically going out and doing like web-based, web-grounded searches, Google searches to basically look, is there any competition? What's the best architecture for this? What are some questions that maybe you want to ask? And so you can think of this kind of like a thought partner. Like if you were going to sit down with someone and kind of riff on your startup idea, that's sort of what this is doing for you. It's not particularly iterative, but it does kind of pause once it's created the project requirements document and say, is this what you want? So the concept draft is just, like your concept, the goal, the problem, the solution. It's like a pretty simple document. And then it creates a blueprint, which is a little bit more fleshed out. And then from the blueprint, it creates this more formal project requirements document, which is based on the blueprint. And then once it has all these, it confirms with the user, very important step, and says, would you like to proceed? We've created your project documents. You want to read them, make sure that they fully capture what you want to do. And then if you say yes, then it hands that off to the head orchestrator. And that head orchestrator then starts executing based on the project requirements document. And then the key thing here is these AI verifiable high-level tests. So that's how it knows it's done, right? Otherwise, it can kind of get confused and like, well, what am I supposed to do next? Whereas if you have these high-level tests, it can just, okay, I'm going to do that one, get the test passing, build out the functionality, and then it goes on to the next one. And it can just kind of churn through those high-level tests until it's completed. Any questions about the quick start? I can show some examples if that's helpful for people, if you want to see kind of what these things look like.
We did have a question around initial infrastructure. And we also had a question around, is the no-code Roo workflow a replacement for Claude SPARC flow?
Sorry, say that again.
Is the no-code Roo workflow, which is the workflow you showed us earlier, is that a replacement for Claude SPARC flow?
So think of Claude Code Flow, or Claude Flow is like the next generation of RooCode. Like it's basically the same methodology, the same SPARC methodology, It's just implemented in Claude Code instead of in RooCode. So yes, it is, in some sense, it's a replacement for RooCode, but it also complements RooCode. So like I'm using RooCode together with Claude Code, like because I like having the IDE, so I can open up files and look at them, and occasionally I'll use RooCode together with Claude Code. It doesn't completely replace RooCode, but I found that probably over time it'll get to the point where I'm just using Claude Code for everything. So this is an example of like the concept MD file. This is for dad joke generator, kind of a goofy project. So that's the concept, and then this is what the blueprint that got generated. So what are the core features for the MVP, the technical considerations, potential future enhancements, and then this is the final kind of product requirements. You know, the overview, goals and objectives, target audience, core features, detailed feature breakdown, non-functional requirements. And so these files were created from these templates. So like, this is the project start prompt, right? So give your program ID a simple name. So basically you're feeding the AI this and saying, I want a document that fills this out, right? And then it's basically like, it's like fill in the blank. And then it takes that. And so this is like the system prompt. You're a senior product manager and business analyst. Your task is to transform a user provided blueprint into a comprehensive, professional, actionable product requirements document. And then follow this explicit refinement process. So this is what the PRD template looks like. And then this is how, I don't know what that one was. I think I was trying to put together an action plan. And then this one, I don't know how useful this is, but this tells the AI to kind of recursively iterate. Basically, it's like a refinement loop where it, rather than just getting the first answer from the AI, it like feeds that back in and it does like another search and it just keeps iterating. And the idea being that this leads to higher quality results. Okay, I'm just checking the time here. We're almost out of time. So I'll just go through these last slides real quickly. What models am I using? I'm using Gemini 2.5 Pro for the thinking and planning. You could use OpenAI 03 or another thinking model if you want. It doesn't matter that much as long as it's like a thinking model. Claude Sonnet 4 I found is the best for like coding, debugging, testing. I've heard that these other open source models are getting better, but they're not quite at the level that Sonnet is yet. And if you want to go all open source, DeepSeek can also serve as a good thinking model. So one thing about using RooCode that I didn't like is I was doing a lot of like tweaking and constantly refining and testing to try to find a good balance between cost and benefit. Because if you just use the most expensive model, you get good results, but then your token costs go through the roof. So I had to figure out what's the right balance, like what models can I get away with that are cheaper and still get good quality. And that requires a lot of tuning. Requestea supposedly has some capabilities where it'll figure out for a given request which model is the best one to use, and it has something called smart routing, where it can kind of route your request to the best provider. And then with Claude Code, because it's from Anthropic, it's either going to use Opus or Sonnet. Some people have built like some open source tools to use Claude Code with like OpenAI models instead of Anthropic models. But it seems to figure out whether it needs Opus or Sonnet. It just figures that out on its own, I think, based on the request. And then MCP servers that I've been using, I found are helpful, or Perplexity for doing like deep research and troubleshooting. Gemini, also deep research, documentation. There's a Supabase MCP, which is really useful for like creating new databases, running, SQL import, just basic admin stuff. And then GitHub, it can search issues, it can search repos, can look for templates that you might want to use. And then context 7 is really helpful if your project uses a lot of third-party documentation. You can just point your IDE, RooCode, at this MCP server, and it'll just search that third party's documentation whenever you ask a question. Because the problem is, like, a lot of LLMs have been snapshotted, some months ago, and maybe the API has changed since then. So if you're relying on the LLM, you might get out-of-date information, whereas this is searching like the latest docs, right off of GitHub. I mentioned Requesty. It gives you one API key, gives you credit you can use across multiple models. It also uses prompt caching, so that saves on costs. It gives you all kinds of really nice graphs. You can see your usage across different models and all your costs. There's fallback options. So if like one model is failing for whatever reason, it can fall back to another one. So the request you don't get like an API timeout issue. It'll just use a different model. And it has smart routing, so it can route requests to the best model given the request. And then they also have a prompt library. So they can inject prompts into every request if you want to give it like, always use this Python library, never use this other one. You can just add that to the prompt library, and then every request will have that. So I've been doing a lot of sharpening my axe these days, and not actually building as much as I would like. I'm doing a lot of like tool refinement and trying out little projects just to see how these things work. But I have been building some things that I think are kind of useful. Like I've built a Minecraft MCP using Python and FastMCP. I'd never used FastMCP before. I built together with Chris this thing called Wakala, just like a WhatsApp app for people in South Africa. The first version was in Python. Together with Andy at a Sundai, we built the first version of Vibe Station, which is an Electron app. I'd never worked with Electron before. And then more recently with Claude Code and Code Flow, I built version 2 of Wakala using Node.js and TypeScript. And that experience was in a lot of ways superior to the version 1. Like it's just been progressing at a much faster pace than before. And then I'm also trying to retrofit projects that I built with Cursor and now update those with Claude Code so I can iterate more quickly. Like I built this thing called SocialCal, which was a Django Python app. And I want to basically accelerate the development of that, building new features and refactoring the code base. And I think that Claude Code Flow is going to really speed that up. These are links to all this stuff. If you scan that QR code, you can get access to this whole slide deck. And these are some other things that I'm going to be looking into in the near future, which I haven't looked at yet. But there'll probably be more of these videos/podcasts. Chris and I are planning to do, might be a bit ambitious, but we're going to try to do like one a week and basically, do like an hour show where we're kind of testing out the latest and greatest AI assisted coding stuff. Stay tuned for more of those. You guys are kind of the guinea pigs for this first one that we're doing. So thank you all. And this is, if you follow Reuven Cohen on LinkedIn, this is the promise. This is the future. This is where things are going. He's really like on the bleeding edge of this stuff. And every time I read one of his posts, I just get inspired to like try to emulate him because he's really kind of like pushing the envelope of what's possible. And I see this and I'm like, I want to be able to do that. That's really cool. And with that, I will hand it back to Chris, see if we have time for any remaining questions in the 1 minute we have left. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, man. You hit it on the nose, I think. So, if you guys need to hop off, feel free to do so. But yeah, I'm certainly free for another 5 or so minutes, Nate, and I'm assuming you can squeeze another 5 minutes in there. If you don't have a hard stop. Yeah, okay. So fire away, guys, if you have any questions. We have some holdovers from Slido. But yeah, if anyone wants to open their mics and chime in.
Nate, the lines are a little blurred for me. And I'm sure the answer is, well, it depends on what you want to do, and what your preference is. But when you jump between SPARC, Flow, and Roo Code, Flow is the successor to SPARC. Claude, is that yes or no? Or
Not exactly. So both RooCode and Claude Flow use Spark.
Okay.
So Spark is like a common thread across both
Okay.
the RooCode. And I should mention that RooCode itself has nothing to do with Spark. That's a
Right.
Reuven has basically taken the Spark methodology and implemented it as custom modes in RooCode.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I know it's all a little bit confused. I've even gotten really turned around and confused by.
So if you're bootstrapping like from scratch, this is like you personally, a new project, would you go directly to Claude Code or Claude Code Flow?
Today, I think I would probably go and use this one. Yeah. So here it's told us that it's done. Just
Yeah.
while we were on this call, it's completed this application.
If you had to get in there and maintain it, just as a person, sometimes you have to get in there and clean up the work, or the AI is just not quite getting some of the nuances. Would you personally be just sending further instructions to Claude Code, or would you hop into Roo and kind of let Roo clean it up?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny we're building a habit tracker because my habit is now to just click on the kangaroo over here. That's like just muscle memories to click over here. And I should mention that they just added this feature now where you can add they have this marketplace where you can add new MCP servers just by clicking this install button. Previously, it was a little bit of a pain because you'd have to go, edit a JSON file and get your token and everything. And now they're just trying to simplify that. They also have these custom modes. So there's now like a library of modes that people are creating. There's like a security one and a DevOps one, project research. So I'll probably continue to use RooCode just because I like the product and I find that it's a really nice addition to VS Code. But I'm increasingly seeing the value of Claude Code for doing like just speeding up the development, like being able to run multiple tasks concurrently. That's what I think the biggest benefit of Claude Code is I didn't demonstrate that today because we didn't really have time, but that's something I'm going to be experimenting with over the next week or two. And maybe the next one of these I can give a demo of that.
Just out of curiosity, can we see the app it built? Is there a URL?
So it did need to have a Supabase set up.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So yeah, we could try to ask it to set that up for us.
Cool.
Nate, since we're getting towards the end, I'm not going to ask you how you think the software business is going to work a year from now, but you've been one of the first people to experience AI time over the last 2 months, especially with the release of Claude 4. Do you care to forecast that out 6 months or 12 months to just think about what will your work look like?
Yeah, I think I'm going to be doing less babysitting and more ideating. I think my job is going to be coming up with the ideas and then articulating those and letting the AI kind of crank stuff out. And then I'm more of like a reviewer, or like the word I keep seeing is conductor. I'm going to be kind of conducting the orchestra of agents, and they're going to be doing the software development. And I'm, of course, going to be reviewing their work and making sure they're not going off the rails. But I think when you have really good product requirements document and you have good tests in place and you've kind of given it your technology stack preferences, it's getting to the point now where it's pretty darn autonomous. I've just seen the quality go up, but like just in the last few months, it's really gone up.
Not if you're using Cursor like I was.
Yeah, well, not all tools are created equally, right?
What's funny is it was in the beginning when I first started to use it, I had basically come up with my own process similar to what you're showing here. It was more primitive, but it worked and it got me good results. And then it just, over the last 6 weeks or so, it just, every aspect of it stopped working no matter what I do. And other people I know that are cursor users are having the exact opposite experience, but I don't know. I'm not going to fight with it anymore. I'm just going to switch tools. This is better.
Yeah. Okay. It wants to tell me how much it's going to cost before it creates the database. I'm confirming the cost with the user. It's going to be an additional $10 a month. Okay, fine. I'll pay the $10. It's pretty cool though that I'm not, Andy and I have been having lots of conversations about like, is the IDE going away? Are web apps going away? And we're just going to have like an interface like this to have our agents talk with the service, right? So instead of me pointing and clicking in a Supabase interface, I'm telling RooCode to go create a database for me. Normally I would be, using my mouse to set this up.
That's a great example of web apps going away. And I think that's a mega trend that's going to hit people. We first heard it from Satya Nadella last fall, that his clients, who are big companies, were just bypassing the apps. And the next phase of that is that you ask for something pretty complicated, and the AI, right now, the AI can spit out like an HTML dashboard. Just write that code on the fly. But it's going to be able to do more and more with that, spitting out the app on demand.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of doing like end-to-end development. And like if I had given Claude Code access to this Supabase thing, it probably would have just created the database for me, right? I'm having to kind of do a little bit babysitting right now. But yeah, in the future, it'll be able to provision resources for you here. So you can see that it's now successfully spit back the URL, the anonymous key, and I think the next step it's going to do is now populate the m.local file, that information. Yep. Report the successful. So you can see this is the Boomerang tasks, where it's basically handing off. It's doing like the next task in the list. So this is my initial request. This was the subtask it created. This is the next task. So here it's updating the m.local file with the URL, the anonymous key. If I wanted to allow my app to do server-side operations, then I would have to put a role key. So let's see. We can try running this now. Oh, we probably need to prime the database with this schema.sql file. It probably wants to create all these tables. It's already doing it. It read my mind.
This is so cool. I mean, you've put a lot of effort into like customizing your setup. You walked us through your flow and everything. But I'm wondering, like, for someone who's just starting out using, say, Roo Code or Claude Flow or both, like, how much setup time do you think it takes to have it kind of work for you instead of the other way around?
Yeah, it has required a lot of tuning and tweaking, and I think we're still like in the early days of these tools, and they're not like fully polished yet. So to be on the bleeding edge, you end up having to bleed a little bit. But the wounds heal. You have the scars to prove it. But I do think like in time, these tools are just going to get really refined and polished and a lot easier to use. I mean, they're already. I mean, you just saw what just happened. It like was one step ahead of me. It already knew like, oh, now that I've created your database, you want the SQL file, migrated, right? Mm-hmm. I didn't have to tell it that, and I think the AI tools are gonna become even more autonomous and more helpful in that regard. Instead of you having to tell it to do everything, it's gonna kind of anticipate and figure a lot of this stuff out. Let's see. There's our habit tracker. I got to install some stuff here.
We also had a question about setting up. So what's your approach to bootstrapping your project, ensuring correct and current versions of packages, libraries, APIs, and tools? You mentioned some of the early, so your flow, right, and how you get started. But in terms of, you mentioned that earlier the project you'd worked on, I think you said this morning, had a out of date version of some language. Yeah, how do you go about ensuring that everything's kind of current and using the right libraries? You mentioned the API, the MCP you have for the API documentation, which is the third-party tool documentation, which is amazing. I'm definitely going to try using that. But yeah, any other kind of like tips or tricks for how to avoid sticking your foot in the mud?
Yeah, I think just having like latest versions of Node and Python running on your machine, that's half the battle. But yeah, version dependency is always kind of a pain in the butt for both Python and Node, which are the two frameworks I'm most familiar with. And you can create like a requirements.txt file that pins those versions, or nowadays it's a TOML file is another way of doing it. So yeah, you can pin versions and kind of snapshot those version numbers to mitigate against the AI like inadvertently upgrading a dependency and then things start breaking. Like what I found is like whenever you get a feature working, ask the AI to write tests. And then that way the next time you add a new feature or you fix a bug, you can ensure that it doesn't break other things that were working by having a test. And if it detects that the tests aren't passing, it will then like fix it. It'll fix it right away before it becomes a problem. Because like the worst thing is like you're just flying blind and it's borked a bunch of code that you thought was working, but it's in a part of the app that you don't touch very often, and then you find out from a customer that there's breakage. So you want to have the AI writing tests for you kind of continuously, and that also helps the AI to build the software more effectively. I don't know why it's not letting me create an account here. It worked with the other one it built earlier today. One thing I found that was cool when I used Supabase for the auth, it used Supabase to send me an email. So I didn't have to set up like SendGrid or Mailgun or one of these other email sending things. Like Supabase just had like a user auth emailing service.
Yeah, that's pretty handy. I'm gonna stop recording now, but wanted to give a huge thank you for putting this together. It was super cool. I learned a lot. But I'm gonna stop recording just in case anyone wants to ask a question outside of so that it doesn't end up on the internet.